Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk to you about something that lives quietly inside all of us. Something that shapes our future without us even noticing: our habits. Accepting that bad habits exist is the very first and most powerful step toward real change. Many people spend their whole lives denying their flaws, pretending that everything is fine or blaming others for their weaknesses. This denial becomes a shield, protecting the habit and allowing it to grow stronger with time. When you refuse to admit that something is wrong, you give that bad habit permission to stay in your life. Acceptance, on the other hand, is like switching on the light in a dark room. Suddenly, what was hidden becomes clear. You can see the problem for what it truly is, and that awareness opens the door for change. Every bad habit starts small. Maybe it's checking your phone for just 5 minutes, skipping one workout, eating junk food late at night, speaking negatively about yourself, or constantly delaying work. These little actions seem harmless at first, but slowly they form patterns. Those patterns become routines, and those routines shape your behavior. The tricky part is that bad habits often feel comfortable. They give temporary relief, a quick distraction, or an easy escape. That's why it becomes so hard to recognize them as harmful. Your mind convinces you that it's not a big deal, that everyone does it, or that you can stop anytime you want. But deep down, you know it's not that simple. Acceptance is about removing that mask. It's about standing in front of yourself and saying, yes, I have this bad habit. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest. And honesty with yourself is far more powerful than perfection. Some people fear acceptance because they think it means admitting failure. But in reality, acceptance is not about blaming yourself. It's about acknowledging the truth without judgment. When you accept, you take control back from the habit. You stop living in denial and start living with awareness. This step also requires courage. It's not easy to look at your flaws directly. It's uncomfortable to admit that your repeated actions may be holding you back. But growth never happens in comfort. By accepting your bad habits, you take responsibility for your actions and choices. This responsibility is empowering. It shifts your mindset from "I can't change" to "I can change, because I see what needs to be changed." Acceptance is also the foundation for self-improvement. If you don't know where the problem lies, how can you fix it? Imagine a doctor trying to treat a patient without diagnosing the illness. It would be impossible to give the right treatment. The same logic applies to habit. If you keep ignoring the root, the behavior will keep growing like an unseen weed in a garden. But the moment you say, "I have this habit," you are essentially identifying the weed. Now you can work on removing it. It's important to understand that everyone has bad habits. No one is perfect. Accepting your bad habits doesn't make you different or less worthy. It simply makes you human. What sets strong individuals apart is their ability to recognize their weaknesses and work on them. Some people spend years hiding their habits behind smiles, jokes, or distraction. But hiding doesn't make the habit disappear. It only gives it more time to take control. When you accept your bad habits, you also begin to understand their triggers. You start noticing when and why you fall into them. Maybe you overeat when you're stressed, or you procrastinate because of fear, or you lash out when you feel insecure. Acceptance helps you connect the dots. You move from confusion to clarity, and clarity is a powerful place to start. This step also allows you to treat yourself with compassion. Acceptance doesn't mean self-hate. It means acknowledging reality with kindness. Instead of saying, "I'm useless because I have this habit," you say, "I see this habit in me and I want to change it." This gentle honesty creates space for growth. You stop fighting with yourself and start working with yourself. By accepting that bad habits exist, you stop giving them silent power. They lose their ability to hide in the background of your daily life. They come into the light, where you can face them, understand them, and eventually break them. Acceptance is the doorway that leads to every other step of change. Without it, the journey doesn't begin. Being honest with yourself is one of the hardest, yet most important things you can do when it comes to changing your life. Many people are able to lie to the world, but the most dangerous lie is the one you tell yourself. It is easy to pretend that everything is fine, to convince yourself that you will change tomorrow, or to believe that your habits are not really a problem. Self-deception feels safe because it protects your ego from discomfort. It allows you to continue living the same way without facing the truth. But this comfort is temporary, and deep inside you know the reality you're avoiding. When you decide to be honest with yourself, you strip away all excuses, stories, and illusions that keep you stuck. You stop justifying harmful behaviors by saying things like, "It's not that bad, everyone does it," or "I'll stop when the time is right." Honesty means looking at yourself clearly, without filters and without pretending. It's like standing in front of a mirror that shows not only your face but also your habits, thoughts, fears, and actions. It can be uncomfortable to look, but that reflection is the key to growth. Self-honesty requires courage. It's not easy to admit that your own choices are creating the problems in your life. It's not easy to accept that you have the power to change but haven't used it yet. But this courage is what separates those who keep repeating the same cycles from those who rise above them. When you are honest with yourself, you stop wasting energy on pretending. You stop living in a false reality and start living in truth. This truth might be uncomfortable at first, but it's the only ground on which real change can stand. Being honest with yourself also means acknowledging your patterns. Maybe you always promise to start new habits, but give up after a few days. Maybe you say you don't have time, but deep down you know you waste hours scrolling or overthinking. Maybe you claim that people or circumstances hold you back, but the real block is your fear or lack of discipline. These realizations may sting, but they are necessary. Without them, you will keep repeating the same mistakes, expecting different results. Honesty also means accepting your emotions without pushing them away. Sometimes people develop bad habits to avoid facing feelings like sadness, guilt, fear, or insecurity. Instead of dealing with those emotions, they distract themselves with temporary comfort. But when you choose honesty, you face those feelings directly. You acknowledge, "Yes, I'm afraid," or "Yes, I've been lazy," or "Yes, I've been avoiding this." Naming the truth gives it shape, and once it has shape, it can be addressed. Another important part of self-honesty is identifying the difference between reasons and excuses. A reason is something real and valid, like a genuine obstacle that needs a solution. An excuse is a story you tell yourself to feel better about not taking action. Excuses often sound logical, but deep down you know they are just ways to escape responsibility. When you are honest with yourself, you start catching these excuses in the moment. You stop giving them the power to control your decisions. Honesty is not about being harsh or cruel to yourself. It's about being real. It's about recognizing where you are so you can decide where to go next. Many people avoid honesty because they fear it will make them feel weak or ashamed. But the opposite is true. Honesty gives you strength. It allows you to take ownership of your life. Once you say to yourself, "This is what I'm doing, and this is where I'm falling short," you give yourself the power to do something about it. This kind of honesty also helps you set realistic goals. When you lie to yourself, you might make promises that are too big, too vague, or based on fantasy. When you are honest, you understand your current limits, your true motivations, and your actual situation. This understanding allows you to make practical, meaningful changes instead of chasing illusions. Being honest with yourself is a daily practice. It's not something you do once and forget. Every day there are small choices where honesty matters. When you delay your work, when you react emotionally, when you choose comfort over discipline. In those moments, if you pause and tell yourself the truth, you slowly build a stronger relationship with yourself. You stop being your own enemy and become your own guide. Honesty may make you face uncomfortable truths, but those truths are the very things that set you free. Without self-honesty, all change remains shallow. It's like trying to build a strong house on a cracked foundation. You can decorate the walls, but it will always be weak from the inside. When you choose to be honest with yourself, you choose to stop living in illusions and start walking the real path toward change. Facing your bad habits is one of the bravest things a person can do, because it requires you to stand in front of the very things that hold you back and look at them without fear or excuses. Many people try to escape from their bad habits by distracting themselves, blaming others, or simply pretending that those habits are not serious. But what you avoid doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in silence. The act of facing your bad habits is like switching on a light in a dark corner where you've thrown all the things you didn't want to deal with. Suddenly everything becomes visible, and even though it may feel uncomfortable at first, it's the only way to truly take control. When you face a bad habit, you are acknowledging its presence in your life. You are saying, yes, this is something I struggle with. That simple but powerful acknowledgement is the starting point for transformation. It shifts the power balance. Before this moment, the habit controls you. It influences your choices, shapes your routines, and limits your potential without you even realizing it. But when you face it directly, you stop letting it hide in the background. You take the steering wheel back into your hands. Facing bad habits requires honesty and courage, because habits often become attached to emotions, comfort, or even your identity. For example, if someone has the habit of procrastinating, it's not just about delaying tasks. It may be connected to fear of failure, low confidence, or past experiences. If someone has the habit of reacting angrily, it might be tied to deep insecurities or unhealed pain. When you choose to face a bad habit, you are not just looking at the surface behavior, you are also looking at the emotions and thoughts that live underneath it. This can feel uncomfortable because it reveals parts of yourself that you may have tried to hide, even from yourself. Avoidance, on the other hand, gives the habit more power. Every time you look away, make excuses, or say I'll deal with it later, you are silently allowing the habit to grow roots. Those roots spread deeper into your daily life, making the habit feel more permanent. Facing it breaks that cycle. It interrupts the automatic pattern. When you pause and observe, this is the habit, and this is how it shows up, you begin to weaken its grip. Facing a bad habit doesn't mean attacking yourself. It's not about guilt or shame. It's about awareness. When you observe your habit clearly, you can see when it happens, how often, what triggers it, and what it leads to. This clear observation is powerful because it turns something that used to control you into something you can study, understand, and eventually change. For example, if you notice that you overeat when you're stressed, facing that habit allows you to understand the real issue isn't the food, it's how you handle stress. This insight only comes when you stop running from it. Another important part of facing your bad habits is accepting responsibility. It's easy to blame circumstances, people, or timing. You might say, I can't stop because life is stressful, or this is just how I am, or everyone else does it too. But facing your habit means looking beyond the excuses. It means saying, this is my action, and I'm responsible for it. This responsibility is empowering because it means that if you have the power to create the habit, you also have the power to change it. Facing habits also involves breaking denial. Denial is like a soft blanket that covers the uncomfortable truth. It makes you feel safe for a while, but it keeps you stuck. When you face the habit, you remove that blanket. The truth might be cold at first, but it's real, and only what is real can be changed. People who never face their habits keep repeating the same patterns year after year, wondering why nothing changes. Those who face their habits, even if they feel uncomfortable, open the door to transformation. Facing a habit can also bring clarity to the cost it has on your life. Sometimes habits become so normal that you stop noticing how much they affect you. When you face them consciously, you begin to see how they impact your time, health, relationships, and self-esteem. You might realize how many opportunities you've missed because of procrastination, how much peace you've lost because of negativity, or how much energy is wasted on unhelpful routines. This awareness is not meant to make you feel bad. It's meant to make you see clearly. The act of facing your bad habits is not about instant change. It's about opening your eyes fully. Once you do that, you stop walking blindly in circles. You stop being controlled by invisible force. You begin to see the pattern for what it is, and that awareness becomes your first real tool for change. Consistency is the key to change, because without it, even the best plans and strongest intentions fade away. It's not the intensity of effort that brings real transformation. It's the steady, repeated actions you take over time. Many people start with excitement and motivation, but they lose momentum after a few days or weeks because they expect quick results. When they don't see immediate changes, they become discouraged and give up. But lasting change doesn't happen overnight. It's built slowly through consistency, like drops of water shaping stone or a seed growing into a tree through daily nurturing. Consistency builds habits, and habits shape your future. When you do something again and again, it becomes part of your routine and your brain starts to automate the behavior. At first, every new action feels like a challenge because it requires conscious effort. For example, waking up early, exercising, or avoiding a bad habit takes focus in the beginning. But the more you repeat it, the more natural it becomes. What once felt difficult starts to feel normal, and eventually it becomes a part of who you are. This shift only happens through regular repetition, not random bursts of effort. One of the reasons consistency is so powerful is that it builds trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on what you planned, you send a message to your mind that you can rely on your own work. This inner trust is crucial for growth. When you break promises to yourself repeatedly, you weaken your self-belief. But when you stay consistent, even in small ways, you strengthen your confidence. Over time, this trust becomes a solid foundation that supports bigger goals and tougher challenges. Consistency also helps you move forward even when motivation fades. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes depending on your mood, energy, and circumstances. If you rely only on motivation, you'll take action on good days but stop on hard days. Consistency, however, is like a steady rhythm that doesn't depend on how you feel. It keeps you going even when you don't feel like it. That's why people who succeed in changing their habits are not always the most motivated. They are the most consistent. Small, consistent actions are often more effective than occasional big efforts. For example, exercising for 10 minutes daily is more beneficial in the long run than working out for 2 hours once a week and then quitting. Reading a few pages every day builds more knowledge than reading an entire book once and forgetting about it. Saving a small amount regularly grows into something meaningful, while sudden irregular efforts rarely lead to lasting results. The magic of consistency lies in its compounding effect. Little efforts add up over time and create big results that are not visible in the beginning, but become undeniable later. Another important part of consistency is patience. When you build new habits or try to break old ones, progress may be slow at first. You might not see obvious changes for days or weeks. This is the stage where many people give up because they confuse slow progress with no progress. But real growth happens beneath the surface. Just like a plant takes time to sprout after the seed is planted, your efforts need time to show visible results. Staying consistent during this hidden growth period is what separates lasting change from temporary excitement. Consistency also trains your mind to focus. When you repeat a positive action regularly, your brain learns to prioritize it. It becomes part of your mental structure, reducing decision fatigue. You don't have to argue with yourself every day about whether to do it or not. It becomes automatic. This mental clarity makes it easier to stick with new habits and avoid slipping back into old ones. Even when mistakes happen, consistency keeps you on track. Everyone has moments of weakness or setbacks, but consistency means you get back up and continue instead of quitting completely. It's not about never falling, it's about returning to your path again and again until it becomes second nature. Over time, this persistence strengthens your resilience and makes you more capable of handling challenges. The power of consistency is also seen in how it influences your surroundings. When you consistently behave a certain way, the people around you start recognizing that as your identity. They begin to treat you according to your consistent actions, whether that's showing discipline, kindness, responsibility, or focus. This external reinforcement strengthens your internal commitment. Consistency is not about perfection or doing everything at the highest level every single day. It's about showing up regularly, even if some days your effort is small. The steady rhythm of daily action is what creates lasting change, not the rare bursts of greatness. Over time, consistency turns effort into identity, actions into habits, and habits into results. Don't let excuses control you, because excuses are the quiet barriers that keep you stuck in the same place, while making you believe you're justified. They sound logical, they feel safe, and they protect your comfort zone, but in reality, they are just stories you tell yourself to avoid facing discomfort or responsibility. Excuses can be very convincing, especially when you repeat them often. They give you temporary relief by shifting the blame away from your actions. But in the long run, they build invisible walls that block growth and change. The more power you give to excuses, the weaker your control over your own life becomes. Excuses often start small. They may sound like, "I'm too tired, I'll do it tomorrow, this isn't the right time, or I can't help it." At first, these statements seem harmless because they offer comfort in the moment. But every time you choose the excuse over action, you reinforce that behavior. It becomes easier to do it again next time. Gradually, these excuses turn into patterns, and those patterns shape your habits. You start believing your own reasons, and before you know it, they become part of how you see yourself. You begin to see obstacles where there are opportunities, and you convince yourself that change is out of your hands. Excuses come in many forms, but most of them are built on fear, doubt, or laziness. Fear makes you say things like, "What if I fail?" or "I'm not ready." Doubt makes you question your abilities with thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," or "This won't work for me." Laziness hides behind comfort, whispering that it's easier to delay than to take even a small step forward. These feelings are normal, but when you turn them into excuses, you allow them to control your decisions, instead of acknowledging and overcoming them. One of the tricky things about excuses is that they can sound very reasonable. For example, saying "I don't have time" may seem like a solid reason, But if you look closely at how you spend your day, you often find wasted moments that could be used differently. Saying "I can't focus" may feel true, but maybe you haven't tried creating a better environment for focus. Excuses often cover up the real issue, which is usually a lack of discipline, fear of discomfort, or resistance to change. Once you recognize this, you can stop accepting excuses as facts and start treating them as signals to dig deeper. Taking control away from excuses requires awareness. You need to catch yourself in the moment when an excuse appears. For example, if you're about to skip a task and your mind says, "I'll do it later," pause and ask yourself, "Is this really true? Or am I just avoiding it?" This simple question can break the automatic cycle. Awareness shines light on the excuses, and once they are exposed, they lose some of their power. Another important step is to replace excuses with responsibility. Instead of saying "I don't have time," you can say "I didn't make time." Instead of "I can't," say "I choose not to." This small shift in language is powerful because it puts the control back in your hands. It forces you to see that your actions are your choice, not something controlled by outside forces. Taking responsibility doesn't mean being harsh with yourself. It means being honest about what's really happening. Excuses also lose their control when you focus on small, doable actions instead of overwhelming yourself with the entire journey. Often people make excuses because the task feels too big or complicated. Breaking it down into small steps removes that resistance. For example, instead of saying "I can't exercise for an hour," you can commit to just 10 minutes. Once you start, the excuse fades and action takes its place. Surrounding yourself with people who value action over excuses can also help. When you are in an environment where excuses are constantly accepted, it becomes normal to give in to them. But when you see others taking responsibility and moving forward despite challenges, it motivates you to do the same. The influence of your surroundings can either strengthen or weaken your excuses, so being mindful of the environment you choose is important. Excuses may give you short-term comfort, but they steal your long-term growth. Every excuse is like taking one step backward when you could have taken a small step forward. The more you allow them to control your decisions, the more difficult it becomes to change. But when you stop accepting excuses and start facing reality, you take back the power that you've unknowingly handed over. You stop letting your mind trap you in false stories and start living in truth. Falling is okay, but never stop trying, because mistakes, setbacks, and failures are a natural part of the journey toward change. Many people believe that once they decide to improve, everything will go smoothly. But real growth doesn't follow a straight line. It's full of ups and downs, progress and pauses, wins and stumbles. Expecting perfection sets you up for disappointment, but accepting that falling is part of the process gives you the strength to keep moving forward. Every time you fall, you're not starting over. You're continuing with more experience than before. When you build new habits or try to break old ones, you are rewiring your mind and changing patterns that may have existed for years. It's unrealistic to expect that you'll never make mistakes along the way. Sometimes you'll slip back into old habits without even noticing, and other times you'll do it even when you know better. These moments don't mean you failed, they simply show that change takes time and patience. The key difference between people who succeed and those who give up is not that one group never falls, it's that they keep getting back up every single time. Falling can actually be a valuable teacher. When you make a mistake, you gain insight into what triggers your behavior, where your weaknesses lie, and what needs more attention. For example, if you're trying to stop procrastinating and you slip back into it one day, instead of feeling defeated, you can reflect on what happened. Maybe you were tired, distracted, or overwhelmed. This reflection helps you prepare better for the next time. Each fall gives you data that you can use to build stronger strategies. The problem arises when people let guilt and shame take over after a mistake. They start thinking, I messed up, so there's no point in continuing, or I'm just not strong enough to change. This mindset turns a temporary setback into a permanent stop. But falling doesn't define you, how you respond afterward does. If you treat every slip as proof that you're incapable, you trap yourself in a negative cycle. But if you see each fall as a step in the learning process, you keep your power to move forward. Another reason falling is okay is that it keeps you humble and realistic. If everything went perfectly from day one, you wouldn't build resilience or understanding. Struggle teaches patience. It reminds you that growth is earned through persistence, not handed to you instantly. This understanding strengthens your mindset because you learn not to fear falling anymore. When falling doesn't scare you, you take more meaningful steps. And that bravery leads to deeper change. Never stopping is about resilience, not perfection. Resilience means bouncing back even when you feel tired, disappointed, or frustrated. It's about saying, yes, I fell, but I'm still in the game. Some days getting back up might mean taking a big step forward, and other days it might just mean trying again tomorrow. What matters is that you don't let a single fall turn into a lifetime of giving up. Consistency after setbacks builds strength faster than perfection without struggle. When you push through challenges, your willpower grows. You learn to trust yourself because you prove that one mistake doesn't control your entire path. Over time, this resilience becomes part of your character. It changes the way you see problems. Instead of seeing them as signs to quit, you start seeing them as temporary bumps that you can handle. It's also important to remind yourself that everyone falls, even the most disciplined and successful people. The difference is that they don't let their falls stop them. They use their setbacks as motivation to keep going. They understand that falling is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that they're actively working towards something meaningful. If you never fall, it means you're not pushing yourself enough to grow. Falling also gives you the chance to build self-compassion. Instead of criticizing yourself harshly, you learn to speak to yourself with kindness. Saying things like, "It's okay, I'll do better next time," is more powerful than saying "I'm useless." Self-compassion keeps your spirit alive and gives you the emotional strength to keep trying. Harsh self-talk, on the other hand, drains your motivation and makes you afraid of trying again. The journey of breaking bad habits and building good ones is filled with moments where you will stumble. What makes those moments meaningful is your choice afterward. If you choose to rise after every fall, you build a habit of perseverance. This habit becomes stronger than any single mistake, and with time it becomes your natural response to setbacks. Replacing bad habits with good ones is one of the most effective ways to create real and lasting change, because habits are like spaces in your daily routine that will always be filled with something. If you try to simply stop a bad habit without replacing it, that empty space becomes uncomfortable, and eventually the old behavior returns. The mind and body are wired to follow patterns, and if one pattern is removed, another must take its place. This is why replacement is more sustainable than pure resistance. Instead of constantly fighting your old habit, you gently guide your energy toward a new and better one. Bad habits usually develop to serve a purpose, even if that purpose is temporary comfort or escape. For example, scrolling on your phone late at night might be a way to relax, eating junk food might be a way to deal with stress, or procrastinating might be a way to avoid discomfort. If you only try to stop the habit without understanding its purpose, you leave a gap. That gap will make you restless, and eventually you'll go back to the old behavior. But if you replace that habit with something that meets the same need in a healthier way, your mind adjusts more smoothly. For example, replacing late night scrolling with reading a calming book or journaling can satisfy the need for relaxation while supporting better sleep. Replacement also works because it shifts your focus from what you want to stop to what you want to build. When you constantly tell yourself, "Don't do this," your mind stays stuck on the old behavior. But when you say, "Do this instead," your attention moves forward. This positive direction helps you take action instead of staying trapped in resistance. Over time, the new habit becomes stronger and the old one weakens naturally. To replace a bad habit, it's important to first identify the trigger. Most habits follow a loop: trigger, action, and reward. For example, feeling bored might trigger the habit of snacking, which gives the reward of temporary satisfaction. If you want to break this loop, you don't just remove the action, you create a new one that responds to the same trigger. When boredom hits, instead of snacking, you could go for a short walk, drink water, or work on a small creative activity. At first, it might feel unnatural, but with repetition, the new response becomes automatic. Replacement also requires clarity. You need to know exactly what habit you are introducing. Vague ideas like "I'll do something else" rarely work. The more specific you are, the easier it is for your mind to follow. For example, instead of saying "I'll stop wasting time on my phone," say, "Every time I feel like picking up my phone, I'll read 5 pages of a book or write down my thoughts." This clear plan gives your brain a new direction to follow instead of leaving it confused in the moment. Another important part of replacement is starting small. If you try to replace a deeply rooted habit with something completely different and complicated, you may become overwhelmed. It's better to choose a simple, easy replacement that fits naturally into your life. For example, if you want to stop watching TV for hours, you could replace just the first 15 minutes with stretching or tidying up. Small shifts are more sustainable, and once they become part of your routine, you can build on them gradually. Replacing habits also works best when the new habit gives you some form of reward. If the replacement feels boring or punishing, your mind will keep craving the old behavior. This reward doesn't have to be big. It could be a feeling of relaxation, pride, satisfaction, or even a small treat. The key is that the new habit must give your brain a reason to prefer it over the old one. Consistency plays a huge role in making replacements stick. At the beginning, you may still feel the pull of the old habit, but every time you choose the new one, you are weakening the old pathway and strengthening the new one. Neuroscience shows that habits are formed through repetition, and each time you repeat a new behavior, you build stronger neural connections that make it easier in the future. Replacing bad habits with good ones is not about perfection, but about direction. Even if you slip occasionally, what matters is that you keep bringing yourself back to the new habit. Over time, the replacement becomes natural, and the old habit fades into the background. This method allows change to happen in a balanced, realistic way rather than through constant inner struggle. It gives your energy a new place to go, instead of leaving it lost in the void left by the old habit. Small habits shape your future in ways that are often invisible at first, but incredibly powerful over time. Every little action you repeat daily builds a path that leads somewhere, even if you don't realize it while taking those steps. People often wait for big events or major turning points to change their lives, but the truth is, it's the small, consistent habits that determine where you end up. Just like a drop of water may seem powerless on its own but can carve a rock over time, your small habits shape your character, your opportunities, and your destiny. Every habit, whether good or bad, is like a seed. When you plant it through repetition, it starts to grow roots. At first, it's barely noticeable. You might think it's too small to matter. For example, skipping exercise for one day, wasting a few minutes scrolling aimlessly, speaking negatively once in a while, or procrastinating on one small task might seem harmless. But when those actions become repeated patterns, they grow stronger. Over weeks, months, and years, they become a part of your routine, and your routine shapes your life. Good habits work silently in your favor, while bad habits work silently against you. A person who reads a few pages every day may not feel a big change immediately, but after a year, their knowledge, confidence, and perspective grow. A person who chooses unhealthy food every night might not feel the impact right away, but slowly their energy drops, their health declines, and their motivation weakens. The effect of habits is rarely immediate. It's gradual, steady, and often invisible until the results are too obvious to ignore. Small habits also shape the way you think. If you constantly give in to distractions, your mind learns to avoid focus. If you regularly speak kindly to yourself, your mind learns self-compassion. If you often complain, your thoughts become negative by default. But if you choose gratitude every morning, your perspective shifts toward positivity. These tiny choices shape the patterns in your brain, making some thoughts automatic and others weaker. That's why the habits you build daily matter so much, even when they seem insignificant in the moment. Your future is not built in a single day. It's built through the repeated actions of many ordinary days. Imagine two people who make slightly different choices every day. One person chooses to read for 15 minutes, eat healthier, and take small steps toward their goal. The other chooses to scroll late at night, skip responsibilities, and avoid effort. At first, there's little difference between them, but after months or years, the gap between their lives becomes huge. One has built a strong foundation, and the other has slowly created a wall of obstacles through their habits. Small habits also affect your identity. The things you do repeatedly become a part of how you see yourself. If you constantly show up on time, your mind starts seeing you as a disciplined person. If you regularly quit when things get hard, your mind starts seeing you as someone who gives up easily. This identity then influences your future decisions. When your actions and identity align, habits become even more powerful, because you start to act according to who you believe you are. Many people underestimate the impact of small habits because they want quick results. They expect big changes to happen overnight, and when that doesn't happen, they lose motivation. But real transformation is not about speed. It's about direction. If a plane changes its course by just a few degrees, it can end up in a completely different country after a long flight. Similarly, small daily changes, even if they seem minor, can lead to an entirely different future. Small habits also build discipline. Every time you choose to follow a good habit, even when you don't feel like it, you strengthen your self-control. This self-control spreads into other areas of your life. For example, if you consistently practice a healthy morning routine, it becomes easier to stay focused at work or control your reactions during stressful situations. Small habits act like silent training sessions for your willpower. When you understand that small habits are shaping your future whether you pay attention to them or not, you become more mindful of your daily choices. You start to see that nothing is truly small when it's repeated often. The little things you do daily are writing the story of your life sentence by sentence, action by action, and choice by choice. Your habits don't define you, your choices do, because habits are patterns of behavior built over time, but they are not permanent labels attached to who you are. Many people make the mistake of identifying themselves with their habits, saying things like, "I'm just lazy, I always give up," or "this is just who I am." When you start to believe that your habits are your identity, you give away your power to change. You begin to think that your current behavior is fixed, and this mindset becomes a wall that blocks growth. But in reality, habits are simply repeated actions, and actions are driven by choices. At any moment, you can make a different choice, and with enough repetition, that new choice can build a new habit. Habits reflect your past decisions, not your future potential. The things you repeatedly did today are usually the result of choices you made yesterday, last week, or even years ago. If those habits are negative, it doesn't mean you are a negative person. It only means you followed a certain pattern for a while. Once you understand this, you stop taking your bad habits as proof of your character and start seeing them as behaviors you can change through conscious decision making. Your identity is not tied to what you've done in the past. It can be shaped by what you choose to do next. This understanding is powerful because it shifts the focus from blame to responsibility. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," you begin to say, "This is what I do, and I can choose to do differently." This shift gives you control. It reminds you that your actions are not set in stone. They are flexible and can be directed toward growth. Even if a habit has been part of your life for years, it doesn't define your worth or your potential. It's simply a pattern that can be unlearned and replaced with a better one through consistent choices. Sometimes habits become so strong that they start influencing how you see yourself. For example, if someone procrastinates often, they might start labeling themselves as a lazy person. If someone struggles with self-discipline, they might think they're weak. These labels are dangerous because they shape how you act in the future. When you believe you are lazy, you're less likely to take action because you think that's just your nature. But if you separate the behavior from the identity, you open the door to change. You can say, "I have a habit of procrastinating, but I'm capable of choosing differently." That one sentence breaks the link between the habit and the identity, giving you room to grow. Your choices carry more power than your habits because choices happen in the present moment. Habits may try to influence your behavior automatically, but at any given time, you have the ability to pause, reflect, and choose a different action. It might not always be easy, especially if the habit is strong, but the power still exists. Every time you make a new choice, you weaken the grip of the old habit and strengthen the foundation of the new one. Over time, these repeated choices build a new pattern, and eventually the new pattern becomes the new habit. Understanding that choices define you also removes the pressure of being perfect. You don't have to change everything overnight to redefine yourself. Even small choices made consistently can reshape your direction. For example, choosing to read for 5 minutes daily doesn't make you a scholar right away, but over time, it builds the habit of learning. Choosing to wake up earlier a few days a week doesn't make you a completely different person instantly, but it starts to shift your identity towards someone who values time. These small choices repeated regularly are what truly shape who you become. Another important aspect of this idea is forgiveness. When you stop defining yourself by your bad habits, it becomes easier to forgive yourself for past mistakes. You stop carrying the weight of guilt for every wrong decision you've made and focus instead on the choices you can make now. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean ignoring the consequences of your habits. It means accepting that you are not your past actions and giving yourself permission to change. This mindset builds resilience and hope, two essential ingredients for lasting growth. When you see your choices as stronger than your habits, you become more mindful of each decision you make. Instead of moving through life on autopilot, you become aware of the moments where you can steer your behavior in a new direction. These moments may seem small, like choosing to get up when your alarm rings, or deciding to speak kindly instead of reacting angrily, but they accumulate into powerful transformation. Over time, your consistent choices build a new story about who you are and what you stand for. Separating habits from identity gives you freedom. It reminds you that no matter how strong a bad habit feels, it doesn't define your character. What defines you is how you respond to that habit, the choices you make after recognizing it, and the actions you take to shape your future. Your identity is a living story, and every choice you make adds a new line to it.